Hello and welcome to Why You're Wrong, a show where we take a look at football's biggest narratives to separate fact from fiction and find out what you might be missing. And on today's show, we look at Chelsea's manager search, which, after the disaster of Graham Potter's 7-month reign, could potentially slide the Blues even further into crisis. It's easy to look at Chelsea's revamp under Todd Boehly and point out mistakes. Kalidou Koulibaly cost over 30 million, has broadly been bad, and is signed up until he's 35. Marc Cucurella cost 60 million and was brought in after a year excelling as a wing-back, stepping into midfield, only to spend most of this year playing a reserved role on the left. And the multi-year contracts handed out to Mudryk, Enzo Fernandez, Fofana's Wesley and David Datro, Benoit Badiashile and Noni Madueke hitched the club's wagon to a bunch of youngsters who could fail to develop or get injured, leaving future managers with no choice over a third of their squad. In some ways, Boehly's angle was right. Football is old-fashioned and ripe for disruption, and he may turn out to be correct on some of these decisions too. Enzo Fernandez, for one, already looks like one of the best midfielders in the league, while Badiashile has also impressed when he's been operational. But the knee-jerk reaction to an American parachuting into London and trying to do things differently also has some merit, with Boehly seeming sometimes dangerously ignorant of why the football landscape is the way it is, and making expensive decisions as a consequence. The latest example of this might be the club's new manager search. Potter's departure leaves Chelsea looking for a permanent boss for the 8th time in 10 years, and though guys like Pochettino and Zidane are currently out of work, the Blues don't have an obvious frontrunner for the hot seat. The confusion around the role has seen names like Brendan Rodgers, Oliver Glasner and even Jurgen Klopp come into the mix, as Boehly and his team begin discussions with candidates. And Chelsea fans can consider themselves lucky that 3 losses from 3 have ruled Frank Lampard out of the running. But what do the top 2 names, according to reports, Julian Nagelsmann and Luis Enrique, tell us about the search?
Big breaking news from Chelsea. Julian Nagelsmann is out of the running to be the next Chelsea manager.
Having him and Luis Enrique on the same shortlist is bananas. It makes no sense whatsoever, and if you were still on the fence about Todd Boehly's project, even after he handed a 1-year extension to Enzo Fernandez, who was only 3 months into an existing 8.5-year deal, then this should change your mind. Let's look at what the coaches do well. Nagelsmann, in my opinion, is the kind of manager we could call an overachiever. Put him in charge of a team without any special players, but with the right mix of profiles, and he can get them to play way above their level. During his spell with Hoffenheim, he took them from 17th to 4th, played in the Champions League for the first time in their history, and perhaps more impressively got over 10 league goals from players like Sandro Wagner, Marc Uth and Ishak Belfodil, while developing youngsters like Joelinton, Reiss Nelson and Serge Gnabry. Now, his performances in the Champions League this season, plus a title win in 2022, show that he can also work with top talent to some extent. But without a playing career or seniority or an undeniable trophy cabinet on his side, it could be hard for him to wrangle a disparate group of high-value stars into a tactically astute and flexible team. So hiring Nagelsmann, while a decent move regardless of who you are, is perhaps not the absolute best move if you think this Chelsea squad is good and just needs a father figure to start them pulling in the same direction. Luis Enrique, on the other hand, is in that latter camp. He's no idiot tactically. His Spain team could have been a serious danger at the World Cup if not for a bad game against Morocco, despite the lack of a proper striker. But you really get him to Tetris your weird squad into the vague shape of a football team. That's why international management suited him, and was also why he was well equipped for the job that proved his greatest success, finding a way for Suarez, Messi and Neymar to function together as they won the treble at Barcelona in 2015. Something we see as inevitable now, but which at the time was regarded as an extremely difficult task. So Luis Enrique is smart and certainly has the authority to organise any slackers at Stamford Bridge. But what if you've got your talent assessment wrong? If you think your squad is really 4th best in the league, Luis Enrique might be the man to urge them back into the Champions League places. But if you're wrong and the squad is actually closer to 7th or 8th, he's probably not going to drizzle enough special sauce on them to play much above that level. That's when you'd want Nagelsmann. So looking at both of these coaches reveals a larger worry about Chelsea. It's unclear how precise an idea the hierarchy has of how good the squad currently is. Now, to some extent, that's understandable. Thiago Silva is still their best defender at 38, but could easily come back next season just okay or even bad. The Blues have a ton of attacking talent, with 6 forwards in the squad who cost over £30 million, but it's unclear whether any one of them is good enough to make Chelsea actually good offensively, in the way Eden Hazard once did, or Harry Kane can do for Spurs, or whether they are all simply useful role players. Trossards, rather than Saka's. And then there's the uncertainty around Mason Mount's future, the Englishman close to the last year of his deal and heavily linked with Liverpool, a move which would play horribly with an already miserable fan base. How do you gauge the level of a squad in this situation? But still, Boehly's track record so far in London is of leaping before he looks, focusing on splashy moves and beating opponents at the negotiating table rather than doing so on the pitch. Now, he could luck out and next year Nagelsmann could Frankenstein together a team which flies back into the top 4. Or he could make the wrong call and sink another £20 million into the wrong guy. Or he could find the right guy, but that guy demands another couple of $100 million invested to make the squad work to his specifications. As Tuchel did, spending €113 million on Lukaku in his first summer at the Bridge. Or Lampard, who brought in £300 million worth of players in 18 months in charge. Or even Sarri, who got $200 million to play with. By committing so much of the club's squad space and cash to a few players, Boehly has painted the club into a corner and now has to hope that whoever he hires is capable of vaulting out of it. The stakes are as high as they've been in decades. There's no end in sight to the upheaval at Chelsea. So that's our show for today. Let us know what you think about Chelsea's manager search in the comments below, and don't forget to send in your suggestions for things I've got wrong or questionable football narratives, and you could be featured on the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.